I knew this Christmas dinner was going to be a disaster the moment I stepped inside. Same house, same fake smiles, same backhanded comments disguised as concern. But this year, I wasn't going to let it get to me. I'm Lily, the youngest of 4. I'm 29, single, and independent, which apparently makes me the family failure. My siblings did things the right way. They got married, had kids, settled down. Meanwhile, I built a career I'm proud of, surrounded myself with friends who actually respect me, and created a life I love. But in my parents' eyes, that's not enough. Christmas is always a big deal in our family. My parents' house is a massive Victorian, beautiful in pictures, but cold and unwelcoming in reality. Every year I tell myself I won't go, but guilt always wins, because, family. I stepped inside, already feeling the weight of judgment. My oldest brother, Jason, was setting the table like he owned the place, his wife barking orders at their 3 kids. Then there was my sister, Sophia, perfect as always, her husband carrying their infant like a prized trophy. My parents were in the kitchen, pretending to be busy while simultaneously micromanaging everyone. I slipped in quietly, hoping to blend into the background. No such luck. Lily, sweetheart. My mom's voice rang out, her smile stretched too tight. She gave me a quick hug, the kind that was more for show than affection. So glad you could make it. Before I could respond, my dad's voice boomed from the dining room. Dinner's ready. Jason, Sophia, get the kids settled. I took a deep breath and moved toward the table. That's when I saw it. The kids' table. A sad, mismatched collection of plastic chairs and paper plates. And there, tucked neatly at the end, was an extra chair, my chair. My stomach twisted. Lily, why don't you sit with the little ones? My mom said, as if she wasn't completely aware of how insulting that was. I looked at the main table room for everyone except me. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. So, apparently I didn't belong. For a second, I thought about letting it slide, keeping the peace. But something in me snapped. I forced a smile. Sure, Mom. Whatever you say. I walked over, sat down in a tiny plastic chair, and stared at the plate in front of me. The mashed potatoes looked like they had been scooped onto the plate as an afterthought. One of the toddlers threw a chunk of broccoli onto the floor. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. I gripped my fork, my hands shaking. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about everything. Every time they made me feel small, invisible, insignificant. I pushed my chair back, the screech of plastic against hardwood making heads turn. Without a word, I grabbed my coat and walked toward the door. Lily, where are you going? My mom's voice was a mix of fake concern and irritation. I didn't turn around. Leaving. I stepped outside, the cold air hitting me like a slap, but it felt good, freeing. My car was parked just down the street, and I wasted no time getting in. My hands were still shaking as I gripped the wheel. Then my phone started buzzing. Jason, Lily, this is ridiculous. Where are you? Sophia, Mom is freaking out. Just come back. Dad, stop acting like a child. I stared at the screen, my jaw clenching. They didn't get it. They never did. Then, the one that made me laugh. Mom, Lily, you're ruining Christmas. I exhaled sharply, fingers hovering over my phone's keyboard. They thought I was making a scene, overreacting. I typed my response, heart pounding. This isn't about Christmas. It's about respect. And I'm done pretending everything is fine. I hit send, tossed my phone onto the passenger seat, and let the silence settle in. The messages would keep coming. The guilt trips, the demands, the manipulation. But this time, I wasn't playing along. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. I sat in my car for a few minutes, just breathing. The cold seeped through the windows, but I didn't care. My phone kept buzzing text after text, call after call, but I didn't bother checking. I knew exactly what they'd say. I could already picture Jason, shaking his head like I was some rebellious teenager. Sophia, rolling her eyes, telling Mom to just ignore me and let me cool off. And my dad, sitting at the head of the table, probably muttering something about how I was always so dramatic. And Mom, well, she'd be playing the victim. My stomach twisted, but not from regret. From exhaustion. This was always how it went. Every time I pushed back, they made me feel like I was the problem. Like I was the one who needed to change, to apologize, to make things right. Not this time. I pulled out of the driveway and started driving, No destination in mind, just away. Away from the house, away from the fake smiles, away from the feeling that I would never be enough for them. 20 minutes later, I found myself at a small diner on the edge of town. The kind that smelled like coffee and bacon grease, with a Christmas tree in the corner decorated with mismatched ornaments. A place where no one knew me, no one cared about my family drama, and no one was waiting for me to fail. I slid into a booth and ordered a coffee, wrapping my hands around the warm mug as I tried to process everything. Then my phone buzzed again. I sighed, finally picking it up. Jason, Lily, stop being ridiculous. Just come back and eat. Sophia, Mom is really upset. You know how she gets. Dad, enough with the tantrum. We'll talk when you're ready to act like an adult. I rolled my eyes so hard I practically saw my brain. Then, the last message. Mom, Lily, please. This is not how family acts, I scoffed. Oh, really? Because if I had done this to them, if I had made one of them sit at a kid's table like they didn't matter, I would have been crucified for being cruel. But when they did it to me, it was just tradition. I took a deep breath and typed back. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing. I sent it and turned my phone face down on the table. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. I took a sip of my coffee, staring out at the snow-covered parking lot, watching as people came and went, laughing, chatting, living their own lives. No expectations, no guilt trips, just existing. Then my phone buzzed again. But this time, it wasn't from Jason or Dad. It was from Sophia. Lily, can I call you? Please. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep the peace I had finally found. But another part of me, one that I wasn't sure I liked, was curious. What could she possibly have to say? I exhaled sharply, then hit the call button. She picked up immediately. Lily, the first, stayed silent. Look, she sighed. I get why you're upset. I almost laughed. Do you? Yes, she insisted. I do. I know Mom and Dad are difficult, but leaving like that? You know they're going to blow this up into something bigger than it has to be. I clenched my jaw. They are making it a big deal, not me. I just left. I didn't scream. I didn't start a fight. I just left. She went quiet for a moment. I took the opportunity to say what I had been holding in for years. Sophia, do you even realize what they did tonight? They literally sat me at the kids' table, like I was some leftover they didn't know what to do with. My voice cracked, but I kept going. Do you know how humiliating that was? She exhaled. Yeah, I do. That stopped me in my tracks. Wait, what? I said. I do, she repeated. It was messed up. I told Mom she shouldn't do that, but she brushed me off. Said you wouldn't mind. I felt something shift in my chest. For years, I had assumed Sophia was just like them, judgmental, dismissive, blind to the way they treated me. But now, hearing her actually acknowledge it, I wasn't sure how to feel. Then why didn't you say anything? I asked quietly. Because it wouldn't have mattered, she admitted. Mom and Dad don't listen to me either. They never have. You know how they are. Once they decide something, that's it. I swallowed hard. She wasn't wrong. So, what? You just go along with it, she hesitated. Sometimes, yeah, it's easier. I sighed, leaning back in the booth. That's the problem, Sophia. It's always about what's easier for them. No one ever thinks about how it makes me feel. I know. Her voice was softer now. And I'm sorry. Something about those words made my throat tighten. I had been waiting for someone to say that to me for years. I took a shaky breath. I don't know what to do now. She hesitated. You don't have to do anything. If you don't want to come back, don't. But if you do, I'll back you up. No more kids' table crap. No more making you feel small. I promise. I stared out the window, my heart pounding. I wanted to believe her. I really wanted to believe her. But could I? I wasn't sure. I'll think about it, I said finally. Okay, she said. And for the first time, she actually sounded like my sister. Let me know. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I will. We hung up, and I sat there in silence, my coffee growing cold. For the first time all night, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just tired. Tired of the games. Tired of the expectations. Tired of always being the one left out. And now, I had a choice. Go back, face them, and demand change. Or walk away for good. Either way, things would never be the same again. I sat in that diner for what felt like hours, my fingers tracing the rim of my now cold coffee cup. The quiet hum of conversation and clinking silverware filled the space around me, but I barely noticed. My mind was stuck in a loop, replaying Sophia's words over and over. "I'll back you up. No more making you feel small. I promise." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But belief was a dangerous thing in my family. Every time I let my guard down, every time I thought maybe this year would be different, I ended up disappointed. And yet, I couldn't shake the tiny flicker of hope that had buried itself in my chest. I sighed and glanced at my phone. No new messages, no missed calls. Maybe they'd finally given up. Maybe they realized I wasn't going to play along this time. Or maybe they were just regrouping, figuring out a new way to pull me back in. Either way, I wasn't ready to deal with it yet. I flagged down the waitress for a refill, and she gave me a knowing look. "Rough night?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Something like that." She poured the coffee, shaking her head. "Holidays, huh? Always bring out the best in people." "Yeah," I muttered. "Something like that." I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, letting the heat seep into my skin. The thought of going home to my empty apartment was tempting. No expectations, no guilt, no one making me feel like an outsider. But then what? Skip Christmas? Ignore them until the next family gathering where they'd act like nothing happened? Pretend I didn't care that I was always the one left out? No, not this time. I pulled out my phone and stared at Sophia's last message. "Let me know." I took a deep breath, then typed, "If I come back, I'm not going to just sit there and take it. I need you to really back me up, not just say you will." I hovered over the send button, my thumb shaking slightly. Then I pressed it. A minute passed, then another. Then, finally, my phone buzzed. "Sophia, I promise. Come back, Lily." I hesitated. Then I sighed, tossed a few bills on the table, and grabbed my coat. I wasn't going back for them. I was going back for me. The drive back felt longer than it should have. The house came into view, glowing with warm yellow lights, looking every bit like the perfect holiday scene. A postcard version of a family that didn't actually exist. I parked down the street and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My heart pounded. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I stepped out into the cold night air and walked up to the house. I barely made it up the porch steps before the door flew open. Mom. Her face was a careful mix of relief and disapproval. Lily. I didn't let her speak first. I came back to say what I need to say, not to apologize, not to pretend nothing happened. "If you can't handle that, tell me now." She blinked, clearly thrown off. "Well, of course, sweetheart. We can." I stepped past her and into the house. The living room was full. Jason and his wife were on the couch, talking in hushed voices. Dad was standing by the fireplace, arms crossed, his jaw tight. And Sophia, she was standing near the dining room, watching me carefully. The room went silent as I walked in. Dad was the first to speak. "You're back." "Yeah," I said. "I am." Jason sighed, rubbing his temples. "Lily, was all this really necessary?" I let out a humorless laugh. "Necessary? You mean standing up for myself?" "Yeah, it was." His wife scoffed under her breath, but I ignored her. Mom stepped in, her voice tight. "Lily, we didn't mean to hurt you. It was just..." "No," I interrupted. "It wasn't just anything. It was deliberate. You put me at the kids' table, knowing exactly how it would make me feel. You made it clear again that I don't belong." Silence. Dad exhaled sharply. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." Sophia, to my surprise, cut in. "Dad, stop." He turned to her, eyebrows raised. "Excuse me." I said stop. She repeated. "Lily's right. We do this every year. We act like she's not one of us just because she doesn't have a husband or kids." "It's messed up," Jason scoffed. "Oh, come on, Sophia. Don't encourage this." "I'm not encouraging anything," she snapped. "I'm telling the truth." For the first time, Jason looked a little unsure. Mom sighed, rubbing her temples. "Lily, you know we love you." I let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah? Because it sure doesn't feel like it." She flinched, but I didn't stop. "You love me when I fit into your picture of what family is supposed to be. But when I don't, you push me aside. I don't get treated like an adult. I don't get respected. And honestly, I'm done with it." More silence. Then Jason mumbled, "You're being so dramatic." I turned to him. something sharp in my chest breaking free. You know what? Maybe I am. Maybe I have to be, because otherwise, none of you would ever listen. He looked away. I swallowed hard and turned back to my mom. I'm not saying I don't want to be part of this family, but I won't keep showing up just to be treated like I don't matter. Mom's eyes glistened, and for the first time, she looked like she actually heard me. Dad was another story. He shook his head, exasperated. This is ridiculous. Sophia shot him a look. Dad. He held up his hands in surrender. Fine, whatever. It wasn't an apology, but it was as close as I was going to get. Mom finally sighed. Lily, the first. I didn't realize. I nodded once. Now you do. A long silence stretched between us. Then Mom cleared her throat. Stay for dessert? I almost laughed. Almost. I glanced at Sophia. She gave me a small, knowing smile. I turned back to Mom. Fine, but I'm sitting at the big table. A pause. Then she nodded. Okay. I exhaled, the tension in my chest easing just a little. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some grand, dramatic resolution, but it was something. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe things could change. Even if it was just one seat at the table, sitting at the main table felt like a victory. A small one, sure, but a victory nonetheless. Mom disappeared into the kitchen to grab dessert, and for a moment, the room was silent, except for the sound of clinking forks and quiet conversation. Jason was scrolling on his phone like he had something more important to do, his wife whispering to him every so often. Dad kept glancing at me like I was still a problem he hadn't figured out how to solve. Sophia, though she actually looked relieved, like maybe she hadn't been sure I'd come back at all. I picked up my fork and stabbed at a piece of cake. It was dry, overbaked, a little like this entire evening. So, what now? Jason finally asked, breaking the silence. Are we all just going to pretend nothing happened? I wiped my mouth with my napkin before answering. Nope, but I'm also not going to sit here and let you all act like I'm the problem when I finally stood up for myself. Jason sighed like I was exhausting him. Lily, nobody's saying you're the problem. I shot him a look. Aren't you, though? His wife, who had been silent up until now, snorted under her breath. She's definitely saying you're the problem. Jason turned to her, looking mildly betrayed, but she just shrugged. I smirked. See? Even Lauren gets it. She's just saying that to mess with me, Jason muttered. Lauren took a sip of her wine. Maybe. But also, you guys do treat Lily differently. I mean, come on. The kids' table? That was brutal. For a second, I thought he might actually listen, might actually hear what I had been trying to say all night. But no. Instead, he just shook his head and muttered, whatever. I rolled my eyes. Exactly. Mom reappeared then, carrying a tray of coffee cups and setting them down with forced cheerfulness. All right, let's move on. It's Christmas after all, right? Christmas. The one day a year we were all supposed to pretend things were fine, no matter how many cracks were showing in the foundation. I took a deep breath, willing myself to get through the rest of the evening without snapping again. It wasn't easy. The conversations drifted to safe, meaningless topics: work, the weather, Jason's kids and their latest achievements, Sophia's baby, and how he was such a natural sleeper, which, honestly, sounded fake. I sat there, sipping my coffee, nodding at all the right moments, but the tension in my chest never fully went away. Then Mom, clearly emboldened by the fact that I hadn't stormed out again, turned to me with that ever-present look of forced concern. So, Lily, she started, voice syrupy sweet. Have you thought any more about settling down? Sophia groaned. Mom, what? Mom blinked innocently. I'm just asking. I set my coffee cup down carefully. No, Mom, I haven't. And even if I had, I wouldn't be announcing it here like some grand achievement. She sighed dramatically. I just want you to be happy. I met her gaze. And I am. That clearly wasn't the answer she wanted. Dad, who had been quiet for most of dessert, finally chimed in. Your mother just means that it would be nice if you had someone, for support. Right, I said dryly, because obviously I can't possibly be doing okay on my own. Jason snorted into his drink. Come on, Lily. It wouldn't kill you to admit that having someone might be nice. My jaw clenched. It wouldn't kill you to admit that I'm fine the way I am. Sophia groaned again. Can we not do this? No, let's do it, I said, turning to Jason. Let's talk about how I can't even sit at the table like an adult without you guys immediately making me feel like I'm failing at something. Mom sighed, rubbing her temples. Nobody is saying you're failing, sweetheart. You don't have to say it, I shot back. It's in every single conversation, every little comment. You all make me feel like I'm somehow less because my life doesn't look like yours. Jason looked away, suddenly very interested in the tablecloth. Sophia, to her credit, actually looked guilty. Dad just shook his head. You're overthinking it. I let out a sharp laugh. Right. Of course. Silly me, expecting my family to actually treat me like I belong here. Mom's face softened in that way it always did when she realized she was losing control of the situation. Lily, honey, I'm sorry if we've made you feel that way. I narrowed my eyes. Are you? Or are you just saying that because you don't want me to leave again? She hesitated, and that was all I needed to know. I pushed my chair back, standing up. Lily, Sophia said quickly, just stay, please. I took a deep breath. I'm not storming out, but I am done with this conversation. Jason rolled his eyes. Oh, how mature. Lauren elbowed him hard in the ribs. Dad exhaled through his nose. But for once, he didn't argue. Maybe even he was getting tired of this. I grabbed my coffee and walked toward the living room, needing space. Sophia followed me a few minutes later, sitting down next to me on the couch. You okay? She asked quietly. I let out a breath. Honestly, I don't know. She picked at the hem of her sleeve. I meant what I said before, about backing you up. I looked over at her. I know. She hesitated. And I know we don't always make it easy for you, but you're still my sister. I swallowed hard, because for all the frustration, all the ways they made me feel like an outsider, I still wanted to be part of this family. I just didn't want to have to shrink myself down to fit their version of who I was supposed to be. I just wish you guys could see me the way my friends do, I admitted. Like I actually matter. Sophia's expression shifted, something unreadable passing through her eyes. I do see you, Lily, I blinked. What? She offered a small, tired smile. I see you. I always have. I don't know. I guess I didn't know how to fight for you. I stared at her, my throat suddenly tight. Then start now, I said softly. She nodded. And for the first time all night, I actually believed her. Sophia sat beside me on the couch, her fingers idly picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. The weight of what she had just said still hung between us. I see you. I always have. It shouldn't have hit me so hard, but it did. Because for years, I had convinced myself that no one in my family really saw me not the way I wanted to be seen. Not as someone who had built a life worth respecting. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. So, what now? Sophia gave me a small, tired smile. Now, I guess we figure out what happens next. I glanced back toward the dining room, where Mom was nervously wiping down an already clean table. Jason had returned to his phone, his wife whispering something in his ear. Dad was pouring himself another drink, his expression unreadable. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The old me, the one who always tried to keep the peace, would have walked back in, apologized for making things complicated, and let them sweep it all under the rug. But I wasn't that person anymore. I turned back to Sophia. I don't want this to just be another argument we forget about by morning. She nodded. Me, neither. A pause. Then, softer, she added, but if we want things to change, we can't be the only ones trying. She was right. And that was the hardest part. I sighed and leaned back against the couch. Do you think they'll ever get it? Sophia hesitated. I think they can. I just don't know if they will. That was the thing about people like our parents. They were so set in their ways, so convinced that their version of love was the right one, that they never stopped to question whether it actually felt like love to the person receiving it. I could stand up for myself all I wanted. I could leave every single Christmas dinner from now on if I had to. But in the end, they had to be willing to listen. And I wasn't sure if they ever would. Sophia must have noticed the doubt on my face, because she nudged me with her shoulder. For what it's worth, I think you were right to walk out tonight. I huffed out a small laugh. You don't think I was being dramatic? Oh, you were definitely being dramatic, she teased. But for the first time in a long time, you made them actually see you. And that's something. It didn't feel like enough, but maybe it was a start. Eventually, we made our way back to the dining room, where the atmosphere was still tense, but quieter, more uncertain. Mom looked up the second we walked in. her eyes darting between us like she was trying to gauge whether we had formed some kind of alliance. Dad cleared his throat. So, we were just talking. That was new. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? Jason set his phone down, looking vaguely uncomfortable. Yeah. About what you said earlier. About how we treat you. I crossed my arms. And, Mom sighed, sitting down at the table. And, maybe we haven't been as fair to you as we should have been. I blinked. I hadn't been expecting her to say that, not so soon anyway. She faltered, looking at Dad for help. We never meant to make you feel like an outsider, Lily. We really didn't. I bit the inside of my cheek. Intent doesn't change impact. Jason leaned forward. Look, I know we give you a hard time, but you have to admit you do isolate yourself from us sometimes. I scoffed. You mean I don't show up to every family event where I'm treated like an afterthought? He winced, but didn't argue. Mom folded her hands together, her expression softer now. Lily, we love you. We always have. I exhaled slowly, sitting down across from her. I know that, but the way you show it doesn't always feel like love. She flinched. Good. Maybe she needed to hear it that way. Dad let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his face. All right, so what do you want from us? An apology? I met his gaze. I want you to see me. I want you to treat me like I'm just as much a part of this family as Jason and Sophia. I want to sit at the damn table with everyone else, not be shoved into a corner like I don't belong. Dad stared at me for a long moment. Then, to my absolute shock, he nodded. All right, I blinked. All right? He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm not saying I get it, but if it's that important to you, then fine. Next year, you sit wherever the hell you want. It wasn't the most heartfelt resolution in the world, but coming from my dad, it was huge. Jason still looked a little skeptical, but he nodded. I guess we could all do better. Sophia smirked. Yeah, you could. Mom sighed, pressing her fingers to her temples. Well, this wasn't exactly the Christmas the first had planned. I leaned back in my chair, me neither. Silence stretched between us. But for once, it wasn't suffocating. Eventually, Mom stood. All right. Who wants more cake? Sophia groaned. Mom, your cake is awful. Mom gasped, scandalized. It is not awful. Jason smirked. Yeah, no, it kind of is. Betrayal, Mom muttered, shaking her head. Utter betrayal. I bit my lip to hide my smile, because for the first time all night we actually felt like a family. Not perfect, not even close, but something real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Later that night, as I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, Sophia followed me outside. The air was crisp, the night quiet except for the distant hum of Christmas lights twinkling on neighboring houses. You okay? She asked. I tucked my hands into my pockets. I think so. She gave me a small smile. You know, if you ever just want to spend the holidays away from all this, you could come to my place. No expectations, no guilt trips, just you, me, and an edible dessert. I snorted. Tempting. She nudged me. Think about it. I nodded. I will. She hesitated, then pulled me into a quick hug. Love you, Lil. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. Love you too. As I got into my car, I realized something. For the first time in years, I was leaving Christmas dinner without feeling like I had lost some invisible battle. For the first time, I had been heard. And maybe that wasn't the perfect Christmas miracle. But for me, it was enough. The drive home felt different this time. Lighter. For years, Christmas had always ended the same way, me feeling like I didn't belong. Like I had to shrink myself down just to fit into the mold my family had built for me. But tonight, I had taken up space. And for once, they had actually listened. Maybe it wasn't a perfect resolution. Maybe things wouldn't magically change overnight. But at least now, the cracks in our family's foundation had been exposed. And that was a start. I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in the car for a moment, staring at the darkened windows of my building. It was quiet here, peaceful. My own little world where I didn't have to justify who I was to anyone. I let out a breath, grabbed my keys, and stepped out into the cold night. As soon as I got inside, I kicked off my shoes, turned on my lamp, and flopped onto the couch. My apartment was small but cozy, filled with books, soft blankets, and little pieces of my life that no one else had a say in. A stark contrast to the grand Victorian house I had just left, where everything had to be perfect, whether it felt that way or not. This was home, my home. I pulled out my phone half expecting another round of guilt-ridden texts. But to my surprise, there were none. Just one message from Sophia. "Sophia, proud of you, Lil. Get some sleep." A small smile tugged at the corner of my lips. I sent back a simple thanks, then put my phone down. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to brace myself for the next battle. And that, in itself, was a victory. The next morning, I woke up late. No alarm, no obligations. Just the warmth of my blankets and the quiet hum of the city outside. I stretched, sat up, and checked my phone. A few messages had rolled in overnight. "Mom, hope you got home safe. We love you. Dad, try not to overthink everything, kid. Merry Christmas. Jason, I still think you were dramatic, but whatever. See you next time." I snorted at Jason's message, shaking my head. Typical. But at least there was no passive-aggressive lecture attached to it. I thought about responding, but I wasn't ready yet. Not because I was still angry, but because, for once, I wanted to take my time, to let myself feel this moment without immediately trying to smooth things over. Instead, I got up, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. "Sophia. Sophia, hey." So, I meant what I said. "About next year." I frowned, confused. "Me, next year?" "Sophia, yeah. If you don't want to deal with all the family stuff, you can come spend Christmas with me instead. No drama. Just us." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me felt guilty for even considering it. Christmas had always been spent at my parents' house, no matter how miserable it made me. No matter how many times I told myself never again, I always ended up going back. Because that's what you're supposed to do, right? Show up, keep the peace, smile through it. But this year had been different. I had drawn a line. And for the first time, I felt like I had a choice. I took a deep breath, then typed back, "Me, I'll think about it." And this time, I actually meant it. The rest of the day was quiet, peaceful. I curled up with a book, ate leftovers from the fridge, and let the weight of the night before finally settle in. I thought about what my mom had said, that they had never meant to make me feel like an outsider. Maybe that was true. Maybe they had been so caught up in their own expectations that they hadn't realized how much they were pushing me away. Or maybe they had known all along and just never thought I'd fight back. Either way, things were different now. Not perfect, not magically healed, but different. And maybe that was enough. That evening, as I sat on my couch with a warm cup of tea, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a photo from Sophia, a blurry shot of the dining table at our parents' house, now empty, with a caption underneath, "Next year, your seat is waiting, if you want it." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then, slowly, I smiled, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the choice. I wasn't trapped in the cycle of guilt and obligation. I could stay. I could go. I could create my own traditions, my own version of family, in whatever way felt right to me. And no matter what I chose, I knew I'd finally found my place. Story 2. My relatives did not show up on the day of my wedding. I phoned my mother out of concern. She chuckled. Was that today, I wonder? A vacation sounded more enjoyable. My sister's laughter reached my ears. I uploaded a picture to Facebook and remained silent. Me with distinguished visitors in my wedding gown. My parents spotted it hours later and hurried to the location, pale-faced. Greenwich's morning broke sooner than usual. The cherry blossoms in the yard of St. Mary's Church were tinted a lovely pink by the gentle April sunlight. Emma Wilson was going to take the most significant vow of her life in this ancient chapel. Emma, a doctor at the City Children's Hospital, was a lady who disguised inner power behind her soft smile. Her style of life, stressing promises and sincerity above all else, had gained her profound trust from her colleagues on her days off. Nothing provided her greater delight than shooting the grins of ill youngsters. Her ability was demonstrated by her $150,000 yearly salary. David Chen, her fiancé, was a branch manager at a local IT business. His parents were Chinese immigrants who had put in a lot of effort to raise him, and he placed a high emphasis on family ties. Even though he made an astounding $200,000 a year, people trusted him because of his modest demeanor. The pair had first met at a charity function held at the hospital, the Wilsons. In Greenwich's social circles, Emma's parents' household was so well known that nobody was unfamiliar with them. Her father, Robert Wilson, was a businessman with $20 million in yearly sales who served as president of Wilson Properties, a real estate management firm. But recently, he had developed an obsession with social media posting and had become more interested in golf than management. He had a reputation in the corporate sector for prioritizing looks and illusion. Margaret, her mother, was regarded as a cornerstone of the community, but as a full-time housewife, her interests eventually turned to social media, and she became engrossed with her 20,000 follower Instagram account. Her 3 weekly spa visits had become a necessary habit. Emma, her daughter, worried about her obsession with likes. Through nepotism, her sister Ashley was able to land a job at their father's firm as finance director, but she was more excited about running her social media accounts than her real responsibilities. She had 100,000 followers, making her a more well-known influencer. Almost all of her $10,000 monthly take-home salary went into keeping up her beauty for the Wilson family. As the proprietor of Anderson Mall, the biggest retail center in the area, Jennifer Anderson had established herself as a unique figure. With yearly transactions of $10 million, $500 million in assets, and a reputation for being a leader in local humanitarian endeavors, she was Wilson Properties' most significant customer. Because of her significant gifts to the Children's Hospital, she was particularly well-liked in Emma's place of employment. Above all, she had been a family friend to Emma since childhood and had seen her grow up. The grandparents, who are regarded as local leaders, had extended invitations to 50 members of the father's side for the wedding. 6 cousins were anticipated, along with 3 sets of more liberal aunts and uncles, a lineup that respected family tradition from the mother's side, and 5 sets of aunts, uncles, and cousins, the pastor and his wife of the church, 3 sets of executives from business partners, 3 families of childhood friends. Mr. and Miss S. Jennifer Anderson and 2 other hospital physicians had also been invited as prominent local personalities. The Wilson family's strong social status was evident from this guest list alone. Everything had been meticulously prepared for the important day. The guests were required to wear formal dress, and the wedding budget was $100,000. Emma, wearing a spotless white wedding gown, sat still in front of a huge mirror in the bridal parlor of St. Mary's Church, where everyone had been anticipating this spring day with the cherry blossoms in full bloom. The expert makeup artist, Maria, was meticulously putting the finishing touches on. Longtime friend Linda was fiddling with the lace veil, looking out from time to time. Cherry blossoms flowering in the churchyard were lighted by the spring morning sun, producing a sight as lovely as a painting, with petals fluttering in the breeze. Your mother and the others are still nowhere to be found. A trace of nervousness was in Linda's voice. By now, Margaret ought to have shown up. In order to capture pictures for social media posts, she had committed to arriving early. She had messaged me only last night, suggesting that we shoot amazing pictures first thing in the morning. Absolutely no contact. It's peculiar. Emma gazed nervously at the screen of her phone. Her parents had not called or left any messages. Ashley hadn't posted anything on Instagram since the previous evening, despite the fact that it was often updated every half hour. Usually updated every half hour. Her stories are quiet. You're starting to look a little pale. Maria's voice was worried. Worry wrinkles formed between her brows, but her hands continued to work on the cosmetics. She could see the bride's complexion become progressively paler. The wedding coordinator, Sarah, came in with her checklist. She started. I've finished the last confirmation with the pastor now. Next, take note of the room's mood. Where's your family? Nobody was able to respond. The eerie atmosphere outside was heightened by the thick quiet that pervaded the room. There was the sound of visitors coming. I don't see any of the Wilsons, whispered. And how peculiar it was to be transported to the bridal room by wind. The phone rang on Emma's phone. The screen came up. With all eyes in the room, Mom suddenly turned to Emma. The room's air felt as though it had frozen. Are you nearly at the church, Mom? The voice that emerged from the receiver was surprisingly upbeat. In the background, one could hear loud music and the sound of waves. I'm in Hawaii right now, Emma. She was momentarily unable to understand the words. It was like listening to a lousy joke. What? I'm getting married today. Was that today, I wonder? A trip would be more enjoyable, in my opinion. In the background came the mocking laughing of her sister. This beach chair is fantastic, Mom." That laughter was sharpened by the sound of the waves. Emma felt her hands tremble. Maria's meticulously applied makeup was gradually smudged by a single tear that trickled down her cheek, causing the pure white dress to tremble a little. "I take it you're kidding?" Her voice faltered. Even she was no longer able to distinguish between melancholy and fury. "It's Sophie, I apologize. It's spring vacation. Therefore, we decided that a family vacation needs to come first." Her sister laughed again. "Instagram is the ideal platform for this perspective. Later, I will give you images. What a beautiful vacation hotel. My fans will adore it." The call was cut off. With a dull thud on the carpet, Emma's smartphone fell out of her grasp. Her heart reverberated with that sound. Everyone, including Linda, Maria, and Sarah, remained still as they watched this extraordinary event play out. In the gentle early light, time only moved ruthlessly. Then a soft knock on the door was heard. 3 quick knocks. It seemed as though destiny had called. "I'm sorry, Emma." Jennifer Anderson was standing with dignity behind the open door. In her hands was an iPad. Mrs. Anderson. She had a resolve in her bearing that had never been seen before. "Why?" Emma's voice shook a little, not out of fear, but because she was expecting something important. "I was about to start when I noticed your family's posts on social media. Pictures of the Wilson family grinning on a Hawaiian beach were shown on the iPad screen. They were laughing in those pictures as though they were completely pain-free. 20 years of companionship. I've kept an eye on you." Jennifer's voice was a mixture of intense love and subdued rage. Something that appeared to be conviction, derived from years of experience, was in her eyes. "Allow me to represent your family today." At those words, Emma's eyes began to well up with tears, but they weren't sad ones. They were the kind of warm tears that fall when genuine love touches you. "We should post now." Jennifer's tone was determined. It brought with it a silent resolve for the impending counterattack. "You mean post?" "Indeed, on their valuable social media accounts. Let's take a lovely picture beforehand, though." Emma took Jennifer's hand. That hand's warmth seemed reassuring, as though it were compensating for the absence of familial affection. The two strolled to the church's center and stopped in front of the vibrant stained glass windows. They were surrounded by rainbow-colored light as the morning sun shone through. That illumination appeared to be a divine gift. "Let's forge new connections." The church bells sounded out at that very moment, as though a new dawn had begun. As though announcing that this day would be remembered, the boom reverberated across Greenwich. Emma wiped away her tears and nodded softly. She was starting to grasp the genuine meaning of family and true love this morning. One by one, visitors started to arrive at St. Mary's Church. The church steeple was lighted by the spring sunlight, and the floor was patterned with vibrant colors as light streamed through the stained glass windows. Her paternal grandpa was the first to arrive. As he walked dignifiedly into the church, fixing the collar of his morning coat, Jennifer Anderson calmly described the problem, revealing deep creases on his courteous face with its well-groomed white beard. "What has taken place?" The grandfather's voice wavered, and his countenance conveyed a range of complicated emotions, including grief and rage. This was totally unacceptable to someone who had spent years defending the honor of the Wilson family. "We cannot overlook this." The dignity of his 80 years of existence was conveyed in those remarks. Her maternal aunt, whose face was whiter than me, came next. His hand was firmly gripping his cane, and the sound of it hitting the ancient hardwood floor echoed. Her sister's behavior left her speechless. She just sobbed while holding Emma's hand in silence. There were real blood bonds, as evidenced by the warmth that passed through that hand. How could they have done such a horrible thing? Deep anguish at the betrayal of familial ties was evident in her voice. After that, relatives gathered one after another. Every time they found out what had happened, they were rendered mute and subsequently exhibited intense rage. The physicians at the hospital lost their normal calm and were enraged. These experts, who often remain calm even when faced with death or serious injury, were unable to remain mute about this treachery. The CEOs of the company partners had harsh facial expressions that are uncommon in commercial conversations. They had been business partners for many years and were aware of the seriousness of the Wilson family's behavior. Emma was silently hugged by the family of her childhood pals. There was no need for words. The complete tale was communicated by their warmth. They were bonded together by the memories they had shared since they were little. Now, with even closer relations, the church garden is full of blossoming cherry blossoms with petals all over it. The beauty of the setting made it seem impossible that what was happening today was true. The time for the wedding ceremony was drawing near. Gradually, the old church's atmosphere became melancholy. Quietly, the pastor came over and spoke a few special words of blessing. He bore the burden of having officiated numerous marriages in this church for more than 4 decades. God will approve of your wedding today, since it is surrounded by everyone's genuine affection. Although God may put us through hardships, more love is always waiting on the other side. David and Emma were standing in the middle of the chapel. They were softly bathed in light from the stained glass windows. That illumination appeared to be a divine gift. Every visitor watched resolutely. Their eyes were determined and full of love. The church reverberated with the pastor's voice. His voice resonated deeply with everyone in attendance and rattled the old church beams. David softly but firmly grasped Emma's hand. Words could not express the sensations that passed through that hand. Emma. His tone was one of intense love. The air around them became stiller still. I promise you that even if we are not blood relatives, we will form a new family. And we will create enduring relationships with everyone present, along with everyone else assembled here. We're going to weave a new family tale today. Emma's eyes began to shine, but these were tears of joy rather than the mourning tears. While gleaming as evidence of fresh optimism, the tears left tiny stains on her bridal gown. The guests assembled at the reception location following the wedding. Beyond family links, there was a strong sense of solidarity. People gathered around the tables now displayed fresh resolve, in addition to grief and rage. Her paternal grandpa got to his feet slowly. There was silence in the room. His glass-holding pose was as stately as a statue. I've never felt more angry in my life. But at the same time, his voice had a firmness that belied his age. Each syllable bore the weight of being the leader of the household and the dignity he had built up over years of business. My granddaughter's sibling and parents did not attend her wedding. In the name of family, this can never be forgiven. In the history of the Wilson family, there has never been such a humiliation. For a brief period, the arena was filled with a thick yet forceful air. But after seeing the love among all of us present, I firmly believe that genuine family is more than simply biological ties. Instead, the real evidence of family is this type of reciprocal support and caring. Jennifer Anderson rose silently. She exuded the parental love of a mother and the dignity of a prosperous businesswoman. I have an idea, everyone. The venue's mood became even more strained. Everybody's eyes were on her. We have fresh connections presently. Should we help those relationships grow on social media, which is where they place the greatest value? The maternal aunt got to her feet and wiped away her tears. Her hands continued to shake. We can all do something together, surely. Let us turn our resentment and grief for my sister into affection for our new family. The visitors started to voice their thoughts one by one. Beyond despair and rage, they were positive suggestions. There was a strong will and drive behind every phrase. A big circle developed, of course. 50 guests joined hands. As though to represent the ties of the new family, that circle drew a complete circle. Together we can form a new family. The arena reverberated with Jennifer's voice. Expectations for the new tale were in that voice. David tightened his grip on Emma's hand as he prepared to start. That hold kept all their emotions in check. Our genuine family is everyone who attended our wedding today. Together, we wish to navigate our new existence with each and every one of you who opted for emotional bonds over biological ones. The guests all held hands and made a commitment. The church bells sounded out at that very time. The tone sounded clean, as though we're blessing the birth of babies. Greenwich was filled with the reverberation of that boom. Jennifer discreetly pulled out her smartphone, as though to announce that this was a special day. Her face conveyed a calm resolve to launch a counterattack. Emma's message was surreptitiously published into the social media globe just before it started. One picture, set against the backdrop of the stained glass windows in the spring sunlight. Emma in her wedding gown, standing respectfully next to Jennifer Anderson. Their faces conveyed serene resolve and intense adoration. Emma's comments started to emerge beneath the picture. The owner of Anderson Mall, Miss S. Jennifer Anderson, is our special guest for today. Since I was a little child, she has always taken care of me and has been a family friend for 20 years. The reception venue's screen showed the post in real time. All of the visitors eagerly watched. My mother called me this morning to let me know that she would not be attending the wedding. Because Hawaii would be a more enjoyable small-scale retreat, the whole family decided to cancel on the most important day of my life. But rather than being laments, they seemed to be anticipation of what was going to happen. "We can't let your new life start this way," Miss S. Anderson said as she hurried to my side. Miss S. Anderson is teaching me what it is to be a genuine adult by providing me with warmth that goes beyond family. When my mother, father, and sister decided to take a vacation in Hawaii, reactions poured in minutes after the post was made. The local community's reactions came first. The corporate community then started to respond. Additional voices emerged from social circles and disseminated over the social media landscape. All attendees attended an emergency meeting at the location. From here, let's choose how to move forward. The arena reverberated with the voice of Jennifer Anderson. There will inevitably be an economic consequence. An executive and business colleague gave a cold appraisal. The stock price of Wilson Property is already plummeting. It appears that the market is doubting Robert Wilson's managerial skills. A lawyer uncle said in a low voice. Legally speaking, there are a number of ways to recover damages for breach of wedding contract, in addition to the potential for a shareholder derivative litigation for reputational harm to the business. Emma, though, shook her head. Money isn't the issue here. I only wanted the affection of my family. There was silence in the venue at those words. Her granddad got up slowly. The history and tradition of the Wilson family weighed heavily on him. For the sake of our family's respect and prestige, this is the proper choice. They all took one last group shot. The bride and husband were surrounded by a wide circle of people. There was no longer any uncertainty in their faces. The new family's close ties were photographed at the photographer's signal. The shutter pressed. The picture was taken while the church bells sounded out. It was the last post. All 50 names were signed on the solemn declaration. Since Robert Wilson, Margaret Wilson, and Ashley Wilson have violated family connections and betrayed the most significant commitment made to the Wilson and Chen family, we, the extended family, therefore announced the total severance of our links with them. As soon as the post was finished, the stained glass windows of the church were lighted by the spring sunset. The arena was filled with rainbow-colored lights that seemed to bless the new family's birth. Emma gave David's hand a firm squeeze. The weeping stopped. She now had a strong sense of resolve for her new life in her eyes. The petals of cherry blossoms swirled in the dusk light outside the window. It appeared to signify the end of previous ties and the start of new ones. Greenwich was experiencing a calm evening, but the word would keep getting out. There would be significant repercussions in the real world, as well as on social media. Another spring arrived in Greenwich a year later. The St. Mary's Church Garden's cherry blossoms were just as lovely as they were the year before. But this year, a lot of things had changed. Social media helped the wedding incident spread across the US, and other media sites reported it extensively. It turned into a social phenomenon that was characterized as a warning to contemporary culture and the demise of a family that was dependent on social media. The Wilsons fell from grace very quickly. Anderson Mall promptly terminated Robert Wilson's contract. This resulted in an annual transaction loss of $10 million. Major commercial partners then started to end their contracts as well. A manager who is incapable of preserving familial ties cannot be trusted with our business. These statements became into a business axiom. The stock price of Wilson Property fell to its lowest level since the company's inception. 6 months later, prompting shareholders to demand managerial accountability. President Robert Wilson was removed from office. He now just manages a little real estate brokerage company. Margaret Wilson's downfall, meanwhile, was much more spectacular. Her Instagram image on her wedding day sparked a lot of criticism. Her account was suspended within 24 hours after receiving harsh criticism from her fans, which resulted in her total exile from social media. In an instant, the connections she had cultivated over the years fell apart. She now sighs deeply every time she looks in the mirror, since she can no longer afford the 3 spa treatments she used to have every week. She currently spends her days confined to her home after receiving a diagnosis of depression from her physician. Ashley, her sister, was also forced to stop all of her influencer work. In social media circles, the reputation of an influencer who had betrayed family became lethal. Her number of followers fell to a few hundred. All agreements with sponsor companies were canceled within a week. She now works part-time at a small cafe after losing her job as financial director at her father's business. Ironically, she ended up in the type of job she used to despise. But this year also demonstrated the strengthening of new ties. The Emma couple revealed their first pregnancy last month. More than 100,000 people liked that post, and it was inundated with congratulations. Naturally, Jennifer Anderson was delighted to take on the role of godmother. The best role of my life has arrived. There was real affection in those words. Emma had also found greater fulfillment in her work at the hospital. Her pastime of taking pictures of kids' smiles had developed into Today's Smile, a well-liked feature on the official social media accounts of the hospital. The whole new family gets together for dinner every Sunday. Spending cozy time together at Jennifer Anderson's estate had become the norm. We are now a real family, beyond kinship. Every time the grandfather says these things during dinner, there is a profound nod from everyone. Every month, new family pictures are taken. These are only meant to preserve memories, not to be shared on social media. All of the smiles in the pictures are sincere ones. 50 people recently attended the first wedding anniversary mass at St. Mary's Church. As a witness, the pastor, who had seen the changes over the past year, gave particular words of blessing. Hearts that support and care for one another are the foundation of a true family. The most exquisite form of this has been demonstrated to us by you. Emma touched her belly and gave a quiet nod, where fresh life flourished. David spread the warm smiles of their new family around them, gently embracing his wife's shoulders. I want to teach this child what a true family looks like. On social media, the wedding incident is still sometimes discussed, but it's no longer a tale of rage and despair. True family consists of heart-forged ties, rather than blood ties. Many people in today's society found this lesson to be quietly but surely meaningful. A fresh spring breeze lifts the petals of the cherry blossoms in the church garden. Although the scene is just as lovely as it was the year before, its significance has evolved significantly. Right now, it appeared to be strengthening the new family's ties. Story 3. For as long as I can remember, my sister Sarah was the golden kid. My name is Amanda. She always came first, even though she was 3 years younger than me, as perceived by our parents. They did not completely ignore me, don't get me wrong. They just preferred her. When I was added to the debate squad, they grinned and nodded. They organized a reception when Sarah joined the cheer squad. We went to the outlet mall when I needed new clothes. Sarah went on a weekend shopping binge at the luxury retailers downtown when she required a new wardrobe. Dad was no exception. Every Saturday, he would take Sarah to the park, buy her ice cream, and spend hours pushing her on the swings. I would follow along, sometimes taking a few steps behind them, and watch their dark hair bounce in time as they laughed at inside jokes. I didn't participate. The fact that Sarah wasn't mean about it nearly made it worse. She didn't attempt to shove it in my face or make me feel bad. Like a cute little sponge, she was simply there, taking in all the attention, as I learned how to thrive in the background. We were close friends, not nearly, but also not hostile. Like two planets orbiting the same sun, we lived in exquisite balance and never came into touch, but also never quite making a connection. I pushed myself into my academics because I couldn't find the same feeling of fulfillment at home as I found in academic accomplishment. At our parents' pleasure, Sarah was happy to cruise by on her charm. I worked very hard. Each A+, academic distinction, and teacher recognition functioned as a brick in the wall I created around my heart. For her age, Amanda is quite mature. At conferences, teachers would tell my parents that I was a very committed student. After giving Sarah a courteous smile, my parents would head straight home to assist her with her schoolwork or comfort her over a small social drama. It was just the way things were, I told myself, and I was okay with it. Now that I look back, I should have recognized the warning flags. The way her smile tightened when I could do something that Sarah couldn't. When our parents actually listened to me, resentment flashed in her eyes. When I was in the limelight, she would subtly shift the subject to herself. But even though I would never be the favorite, I was too focused on proving myself and trying to be the perfect daughter. I believed that if I worked hard and accomplished enough, people could eventually recognize me for for who I truly am. My getaway was college. At last, a setting where putting in effort genuinely paid off, where accepting responsibility was not a reward but a strength. Even though my straight has finally paid off, I was enrolled to State University on a partial scholarship. While some freshmen were having a hard time adjusting, I pushed myself into college life with the same vigor I'd brought to high school. I was doing very good. I joined the business club, made the dean's list, and received an internship at Preston and Associates, one of the city's top financial firms. You're naturally good at it, my supervisor told me at my internship assessment. After graduation, we hope you will work with us full-time. I nearly floated home that day. For once, everything was coming together as I had intended, not as anybody else had. In contrast, Sarah started college 3 years after I did. Her full tuition was sponsored by her parents, provided her with a comfortable apartment near university, and a monthly allowance. I earned more than that in my part-time work. You're special. When I brought up the disparity, Dad remarked, your sister needs to concentrate on the college experience. You actually enjoy studying. He was not mistaken. Sarah was expanding her social media following as I was building mine. Her Instagram was flooded with pictures from spring break activities and parties. She always had a fresh yarn about some crazy night out when I returned home. You should come party with us someday, she'd say. I knew full well that I couldn't join her after graduation, since I was too busy with my studies and internship. Preston and his associates kept their word. I rented a modest but respectable apartment downtown when I first started as a junior analyst. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Acquired with my own hard labor. James and I met there. He had soft eyes, was tall, well-groomed, and radiated a calm assurance that made my heart skip a beat. He was the financial director. After a company happy hour, we began bumping into each other in the break room. At last, he invited me to dinner. When he proposed 6 months later, I was over the moon. He did it properly down on one knee at our favorite restaurant, with a ring that must have cost him at least 3 months' salary. I was thrilled to share with my family. Sarah, who had just graduated and returned home, was invited to join us for supper at my parents' place. She'd been working some entry-level marketing job, though, from her social media. When she was happy, she seemed to be more active than when she was at her desk. The evening got off to a decent start. Mom made her amazing pot roast. Dad uncorked his finest wine, and James enthralled everyone with stories about his work and aspirations for the future. Amanda definitely lucked out with you, Mom gushed, touching James's arm. What a mature young dude. They make such a beautiful match, Dad said, smiling at us. What time is the wedding? For once, it felt wonderful to be the focus of attention. James clutched my hand beneath the table while my parents peppered us with questions regarding wedding places and dates. Conversely, Sarah was seated across the table, munching on her food, her face growing darker by the second. I saw it while she was examining my engagement ring. She drew a little line with her mouth. She would shift uncomfortably in her chair or roll her eyes a little whenever James spoke. James and I agreed not to hurry into the wedding. We started looking at places, discussing color schemes over dinner, and planning our future together on the weekends. I'd never been happier that everything changed on a Tuesday evening. I had just ended my weekly video conference with my wedding planner, so I knew that it was Tuesday. I was still in my work clothes when James knocked on my door. There was something strange. His face resembled a thundercloud, and he usually texted before coming. "We need to talk," he continued, pushing past me into the apartment. He spoke in a frigid tone, not like the warm, comforting tone I was used to. "What's wrong?" I asked, my gut nodding with anxiety immediately. He pulled out his phone and started browsing. "Would you mind explaining?" My heart stopped as he showed me each photo. There, I saw someone who resembled myself in precarious situations with other men. Screenshots of purportedly sexual text conversations between me and other males were all on his screen. "James, it's not." My boys never shuddered as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. "They're not real. I've never cheated on you." "Fake." He gave a harsh laugh. "These were supplied to me by your own sister. Sarah made this whole thing up." "Is that what you mean? Sent false images and messages to keep us apart? Why would she do that? I have no idea why she would do this." "James, please check my phone." I raced over to the coffee table and snatched it. "Check everything. There's nothing like this there. I've never cheated on you. Do not bother." He moved back and cut me off as I tried to hand him my phone. Amanda, I trusted you. I thought you were different. But you're no different from everybody else. A traitor who cheats and lies. Please, James. I begged, tears streaming down my face. You are familiar with me. You know I wouldn't do this. But his eyes were chilly and distant. We're done. Never try to get in touch with me again. My world was upended by the finality with which the door slammed behind him. I tried to contact him right away, but it went straight to voicemail. There would be no text message delivery. The email bounced back. I was blocked everywhere by him. I sobbed till my whole body shook and collapsed onto my couch. How can this be? What gave him the sense that I would cheat on him and Sarah? I had been harmed by my own sister. As I cried till my eyes were dry, the hours blended together. My phone was lighting up with worried texts from friends and coworkers. It seemed that James had already started to spread the word about my infidelity. I cried myself to sleep, and my only objective when I woke up the next morning was to confront Sarah. As I dialed her number, my hands shook. She was half expecting the call to be ignored, but she picked up on the second ring. If it's not my adulterous sister, that is. In answer, she said in a mock-sweet voice, "You did it, but why?" My voice broke. "Why would you fabricate such messages and photos?" She laughed. Actually, I chuckled. My blood ran cold at the sound. "Really, Amanda, did you think I would give you your perfect happily ever after? You're wed to a handsome, accomplished man like James. Please, what are you talking about? He is not worthy of you." Her voice suddenly turned savage. "None of it is fair to you. The best position, the ideal fiancé. Who do you think you are?" I felt as though I had been struck. "Sarah, we're sisters." "Sisters?" she sneered. "Please. You're only second best, Amanda. You always were and always will be. And you will always be there. Were you really under the impression that you could marry someone like James before me? It doesn't work like this. In a single moment, 25 years of sisterhood destroyed all those memories, whispered secrets, forced smiles at family gatherings, and shared rooms. Everyone gained a unique meaning. The tense moments, eye rolls, and backhanded compliments all made sense now. With the knowledge slamming me like a truck, I whispered, "You've been jealous of me the entire time." "Are you jealous?" Then she laughed again. "Don't fool yourself. In every way, I'm superior than you. I couldn't bear to watch you and James play house when everyone is aware of your lack of merit for him." That afternoon, desperate for help, I went to my parents' place. They must believe me. They would undoubtedly notice Sarah's actions. I was mistaken. "Amanda, sweetheart." Mom shook her head and answered, "Why are you attempting to blame your sister for your mistakes?" However, I made no mistakes. I practically shrieked. "Sarah faked everything." That's what she said. Dad crossed his arms. "Your sister would never act in such a manner. Give up attempting to assign blame. You might acknowledge it if you cheated on James." I left their house in a daze. Again, it was Sarah, the golden child who could do no wrong. In addition, I was the unreliable screw-up. But even while I was down, life kept kicking me. My access card was denied when I got to work the next morning. Security took me to HR, where a compassionate-looking woman handed me my termination papers. She looked around to make sure no one could hear her mutter, "I'm so sorry." James urged for quick firing. He replied he couldn't work in the same building as well. I didn't even finish reading the paperwork. I just signed it, packed up my desk, and walked with my head held high. At least until I reached my car, where I really lost it. 3 days later, my best buddy Jenny gave Amanda a call. The news that Sarah and James are dating is something I'm not sure how to tell you. She has been posting pictures of the two of them on Instagram. She claims that since your betrayal, she has been assisting him in getting better. I tossed my phone across the room and hung up without responding. Within a week, I had lost my job, my fiancé, and the trust of my family. And now, my sister had helped me lose the man she was now seeing. I was hit like a ton of bricks by a month of depression. I seldom left my flat except to get food. I've been saving for the wedding, thank God. If nothing else, I would be able to spend my time sulking without worrying about rent. I spent my days in a haze, alternating between sobbing and just looking at Netflix shows. It was hard for me to focus. I kept my phone off most of the time. I couldn't take any more photos of Sarah and James together. I couldn't bear to get another nice message from friends asking how I was. Then I woke up in bed with some lucidity at about 3 in the morning. I was able to think clearly for the first time in weeks after the fog cleared. I didn't want to die. I wanted more than petty retaliation, with inebriated texts or drama on social media. No, I wanted to expose Sarah for who she truly was, to show everyone the serpent hiding behind that innocent grin. It was as if a switch had been flipped in my brain. I took my first bath in days the following morning, dressed in my finest suit, and began looking for a job. In less than 2 weeks, I was hired by Morrison Financial, a larger company than Preston, with a corner office and better benefits. I even resumed going to see my folks. I'm doing better now, I tell them with a practiced smile. Sometimes things break apart so that better things might come together. In the end, they were relieved to see their older daughter mature. I went through family meals, nodding nicely when Sarah and James would arrive up hand in hand. When no one else was present, Sarah would give me these small smirks and he would avoid looking at me directly. James and I are considering about getting engaged, she revealed at one such meal, studying me carefully for a reaction. I just smiled and asked to pass the potatoes. This went on for 2 years. As my career progressed, I built a reputation for myself in the industry. I went on a couple dates and waited, but nothing committed. Patience had always been my strength. Then I had my opportunity. Sarah was hosting Sunday supper at our parents' place without James because he was on a business trip. While aiding Mom with dessert, she had left her phone on the kitchen counter. I was aware of her passwords. She'd always been irresponsible about security, placing sticky notes with her login information all over her workstation at our parents' house. Getting into her phone took less than a minute, and there it was. Months of communications with someone named Mike, hundreds of texts, dozens of photos that would make James's blood boil. Jay is so dull, my God. One message was read. He only discusses his investments and job. At least he's loaded. I'm really happy to see you tomorrow, honey, another said. We're staying in a luxury hotel owing to Jay's credit card. My hands shook as I forwarded everything to my email. The hotel receipts, the pictures, the texts. In their conversation history, I even located Mike's address. They weren't even attempting to exercise caution. Obtaining the video footage was nearly too easy. Mike's residence was in a calm suburban neighborhood, suitable for inconspicuous observation. I parked a rented car across the street for a few of evenings, with my phone's camera ready. Sarah wasn't exactly subtle about her afternoon visits. She'd pull up in the Mercedes. James had bought her, practically skipping to Mike's front door. Their passionate hugs on the doorstep gave me all the footage I needed. Baby, I missed you. She would cue loudly enough to be heard by the microphone on my phone. James, in comparison to you, is really boring. I collected 3 weeks worth of videos. Sarah sneaking out of his house at strange hours, making out with Mike against his car, and laughing over what appeared to be pricey champagne on his patio. It was probably paid for with James's credit card. The engagement celebration followed. Sarah demanded that it be held at our parents' house. She had argued that it was more intimate, but in reality, she wanted to impress the entire family. The ring James gave me was twice as big as the one he used to pop the question. James's whole family, as well as friends and family, were crammed into the house. In the living room, Sarah held court while her ring was visible to all. Mom and Dad smiled with delight, while James's folks continued complimenting on what a wonderful couple they formed. I would want to toast, I announced, rising up during a gap in the discourse. All eyes went to me. Sarah shot me. That superior look I'd grown so used to, the same look she'd given me 2 years ago when she'd stolen my fiancé. What a miserable creature. Probably assumed I was ready to offer some nice statement about being delighted for them. I want to share something with everyone. I continued to connect my phone to the TV. You could say a little engagement present. The first text messages appeared on the screen. Sarah's face became white. What is this? Squinting at the messages, James got to his feet. Oh, just some conversations between your fiancé and her boyfriend, Mike. Calmly, I replied. There are a good number of them. They like telling others how boring you are. James, you're at least rich, aren't you? Sarah sputtered. That's not. And here's some video evidence in case anyone has questions. The films of Sarah and Mike kissing her and leaving his house at midnight were shown to me one by one. Sarah laughing about James while sipping expensive wine. Chaos broke out in the room. James shouted at Sarah as he got to his feet. His parents yelled about scandal and shame. Our family members were pointing and whispering. You insane fool, I heard Sarah yell at me. How did you accomplish this? Funny, I remarked. 2 years ago, I wanted to ask you exactly that. Mom collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Dad didn't move, like a fish out of water, opening and shutting its mouth. I didn't stay to see what happened. I grabbed my stuff, got to my car, and drove home in complete solitude. I poured a glass of wine for myself inside my flat and sat on my balcony to watch the city lights sparkle. In 2 years, for the first time, I felt entirely at peace. My phone rang at about 7 a.m. The following morning, the screen flashed Mom's name. How could you inflict such disgrace to your sister? Before I could say hello, she let out a scream. James called off the engagement. She is distraught. You need to fix this right now. Fix what exactly? I asked calmly. The reality of her infidelity. The fact that she was apprehended. Or maybe you want me to see to it that she is ultimately held responsible for her crimes. She's your sister. On the line was Dad's voice. I was on speaker. Family protects family. Either you or we'll solve this, or did I interrupt him? Returned to her side. Go ahead. I'm accustomed to it. I blocked their numbers and hung up. Before I dealt with any more family turmoil, I needed coffee. But before I could complete my first cup, there was a knock on my flat door. Open up, you blasted bastard. Sarah's words reverberated throughout the corridor. I approached the door gently, unlocked it, and took a step back as she hurried in. You ruined everything. With mascara flowing down her cheeks, she let out a scream. My life was ruined by you. Do you not believe that karma is a bitch? I sipped my coffee once more. I'll make you answer for this. From my wall, she grabbed a framed photograph and threw it at me. Like you made me pay 2 years ago, I got away with it easily. Quietly, I asked. When you took James for yourself, when you ruined my relationship, and when you made up proof that I had cheated. She froze, her face lighting up with realization. Did you have this planned? Everything? The entire time? 2 years. I was an attestant, watching and waiting for 2 years. Playing the forgiving sister for 2 years. For 2 years, you were aware that you would finally show who you really were. The words, you're crazy, she whispered. Sarah, no, I have patience. In contrast to you, I was able to exact my revenge with just tangible proof. She ran out of my apartment like she had seen a ghost. My parents sent me a litany of guilt-tripping notes in the weeks that followed. Sarah had lost her work due to her mental instability. She wasn't sleeping or eating. She'd moved back home and spent her days crying in her old bedroom. Your sister has been ruined by you, Mom texted. Are you happy now? I didn't answer. What might be said? Dad made another attempt. You're out of the will if you don't make this right. Is that what you want? I responded to that one at last. Do anything you want with your money. I've already acquired everything I desired. The reality. They didn't like that answer much. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what others thought of me. My job was blossoming, but my personal life had been a soap opera. When Morrison Financial promoted me to senior director, I got a big raise in a corner office. After losing her marketing career, Sarah, on the other hand, fell to her lowest point. She returned to our parents' house. At that point, the drinking began. You can drink wine for breakfast or vodka for lunch. She managed to get it. Eventually, during one of her drunken tantrums, the truth came out. Later, Mom informed me about it. How Sarah began chatting while spread on the couch, halfway through a bottle of wine. I showed him the images she'd mumbled, made them all up. I encountered a woman who looked like Amanda. Got someone to assist me fake the texts. She didn't deserve him anyhow. I was more deserving of him. Mom and Dad listened in stunned silence as their perfect younger daughter finished her drunken confession, spilling all the beans about how she had orchestrated my death. 2 years of falsehoods came tumbling down in one alcohol-soaked evening. Dad phoned me the next day. His voice carried passion. Amanda and I, we have to talk. Would you be able to visit? When I found them both in the living room, they looked 10 years older. Mom couldn't even look me in the eye. We were mistaken. Dad explained everything in plain terms. For a very long time, we have been mistaken. Mom burst into tears. What prevented us from seeing it? What caused us to be so blind? You were let down by us. Not just about James, but your entire life, Dad said. Sarah was always our favorite. Always made excuses for her. We couldn't believe she was capable of such cruelty. So we let her get away with ruining your happiness. It was the expression of regret. All my life, I had been waiting to hear. But instead of feeling triumphant, I felt worn out. Dad cleared his throat. I've been thinking about it. Family therapy could be something we wish to attempt. the three of us to work through everything. So we did. Every Tuesday night, we gathered in the medical marshal's office to unravel decades of mistrust, animosity, and favoritism. It wasn't simple. Shouting matches and tears were heard. Awkward quiet for weeks. But slowly, things started to change. As for Sarah, my parents finally did what they should have done years ago. They cut her off. They gave her enough money to pay an apartment security deposit and the first month's rent, sincerely apologizing for what she had done and letting her know that she could come back as soon as she got help. According to what I've been told, she lives in a studio apartment and works as a receptionist downtown. She occasionally texts her parents, but they are adamant about maintaining their limits. Eventually, James contacted out. He had heard it all from my folks. The years of manipulation, Sarah's confession, everything. He requested a coffee date. I ought to have trusted you, he said, seeming older and weathered. At the very least, I ought to have heard your perspective. Perhaps we might try again, although I'm aware that it's probably too late. I examined his face. It was the face I had thought I would see every morning for the rest of my life. I felt nothing. No, I said quietly. I forgive you, James, but I no longer love you. 2 years ago, I was a different person. I live a calmer life now. Every Sunday, my parents and I eat dinner together. We're not perfect. There are still uncomfortable moments. Old habits don't go away easily, but we're trying. And that's more than we ever did previously. I don't feel bad about telling Sarah. I refer to it as justice, although some may term it retaliation. She is presently coping with the consequences of her choices. For my part, I'm precisely where I want to be. My career is doing well. I live alone. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel less than anyone.